Like, because here's what happens. If this guy dies, this player on the inside of the route goes into the 50 and starts chopping up everybody. And as soon as one person starts getting pressure from that, they shout 50 snake, and then literally everybody's gun turns to the 50. Which is like the biggest, that's to me the biggest problem that lower divisions suffer from, is that everybody panics and tries to kill that snake guy, and most people waste their time not realizing that that's not their job. Their job isn't to do that. That's just how I would analyze this field. Like, I would start with a question and seek to answer it by understanding who can do it best. And so if we do that for every single spot on the field, we can then understand what jobs exist on that field. Let's talk about the subject of picking up jobs, like jobs within paintball, and something I noticed in the scrimmage with Thunder that I thought was really interesting to note and pay attention to. So a lot of times in lower divisions, people struggle to slow down the game or stop the bleeding, right? So when you lose one body or two bodies on one side of the field, it can be really difficult to, like in lower divisions, to kind of get a hold of the point and stop it from getting out of control. Mostly because, one, it's something that's very important to pick up on, especially as you hope to move up divisions, but it's also something that is very fun to actually work on as a team or even as an individual. But this concept has to first come from a place of understanding what your job is inherently in certain positions, right? So I'm not going to spend too much time on this because most of you who watch my stream and whatever, who know anything about paintball, know that these are kind of the things that we do, okay? So as a front player, your primary position, as we all know, is to get up the field. This is your job, right? And you do that by controlling the tape, and then when you've controlled the tape, then you shoot the next widest guy who's stopping you, and then you make that move, right? This is how you play the front position. There are definitely times in which you want to look on the inside of the field, and that's usually done as soon as you make that move, and then you look on the inside. But the reason why looking on the inside of the field is really useful is because in many cases you can punish the opposite side of the field when you've gained that much ground while also staying super safe. So on this layout in particular, if you're playing in this bunker, in the 50 Dorito, we'll call it, and you're looking strictly on the inside of the field, this whole area, obviously you have, this bunker kind of blocking you, but you have this entire area to work with where you can start to see the snake side of the field making moves. And so looking up on the inside of the field every time you advance is a really good way to maximize the advantage that you've gained because of your positioning, right? But one of the, and again, you also protect yourself from the people who know you've made that move on the same side of the field. Because like on this layout in particular, one thing that's very, very easy to spot is when you decide to make this move, right? Because if they've got a guy right here, and let's say they saw you make that move, but they missed, well, you best believe that this guy is going to be posting up right here, shooting paint, trying to kill you, and maybe even shooting here. But so long as your teammate behind you, either in the Dorito corner or this beast, for example, this bunker here, as long as he's controlling this guy and not letting him move up the field, then you're going to be able to maximize your damage, essentially, because you're looking on the inside while staying alive. Now, there are times in which when you get to this position, you're going to want to wrap, whatever, we're aware of this, right? This is true for, we even watched in the Astra Invitational that when the guy got to the 50 snake, he was staying on the inside of the field trying to shoot a Dorito guy, when in reality you could just like wrap on the outside of your bunker and then take that angle to kill him. So there's definitely times where wrapping on the outside when you're the widest guy is better, but on this layout in particular, it seems that it's really easy to punish the snake side, just as an example, when you stare on the inside of the field. All right, the guy behind him, his job is to protect the guy in front of him. And the way that you do that is by holding the widest guy, right? We all know this, okay? So whoever the front player is, your job is to shoot as much paint as you can to prevent them from moving. In addition to that, your job is to, we didn't really talk about this in the attacker's position, but your job is also to make sure that you are connecting your front player's communication to your mid player's communication, and in some cases to the number 2 on the other side of the field, right? It's not often, though it is possible, and like there are layouts where this makes sense, but it's not very common that this person will be trying to shout this person's name and tell him to shoot somebody, but it does happen. It's just that usually that's best served by this person calling something out. So let's just make up a call, okay? Let's say that this call is red, and that red means to shoot a particular bunker. So if I say red the Dorito corner, and I'm starting to shout that, there needs to be a person on the opposite side of the field who knows what that call is, and that both players don't try to do that job, but that you then can orchestrate that play, right? So in some cases, that's what this would look like. Now that is a real thing. That is a thing that high level teams do, is they have calls for stuff like this, and teams at a high level understand that when you call a certain bunker, that there's a person who's better suited to do that job than others. And that's the first, well, I can get to that in a second, but we all kind of understand what the number 2's position is, right? So the number 3's position, as you would have guessed it, is to connect both sides of the field in whatever communication he's receiving. I think the other thing that's really important for them to do is to make sure that you're calling the body counts. So, 55, 45, 32, whatever, right? Making sure that everybody on the field knows how many people are alive or dead is really important. And that's also true that these guys in the back the number 2s should be doing that as well. But the number 3 is best suited to do that because in most cases they are the furthest back on the field, or they're not getting as much pressure as everybody else, and so they're able to relay that information. So the same is true if we look on the snake side and what these roles and responsibilities are. So then if we understand from a basic perspective or basic point of view what our jobs are, just at a base level, then we can start to understand who should be picking up who's like what things you should be doing when certain bunker names are called, or when you're trying to analyze a field, who is best suited to do a certain job. Because the mistake that I see a lot of lower division people make is that they either they try to do everything themselves, or they try to offload all of the responsibility onto everybody else, right? When in some cases, it really is just a particular player's responsibility to do a certain job. So for example, this is kind of a hard layout to do this with, but a lot of times there's 2 types of jobs that you're really trying to do throughout a game, right? You're either trying to hold a gap or a zone. We're just going to use this zone as an example. This isn't actually a thing that you would do in this layout, but let's pretend that this is just a zone you wanted to hold. And so you want to hold this zone. Actually, we can make this even easier. Let's just use this snake as an example, okay? Let's say you wanted to hold this gap right here because you want to keep them out of the snake. So if you want to, like I said, you have kind of 2 primary jobs: to hold a zone or to like bully a player, right? And so, or to like shoot a certain bunker call. So in the case of holding a zone, you have to ask yourself who is best suited to do that job. Who can see that gap the easiest and do it so safely. So if we look at the field, we can see that the home guy can't even see that, right? There's literally no way that the home guy could do that job. If we look at the can, we can see that he can't really do that job either. There is like a joke of a gap right here that you could shoot. Again, I wouldn't rely on that. You could do that job from here, though it is really small, but you could definitely do that job if you were able to get here safely and shoot, and get that stream up fast enough before the player gets into the snake. So this is where like we found one position on the field so far where you could pick up that job, but now we have to ask ourselves, can we reliably get to this bunker, or can we consistently get to this bunker without running the risk of dying? And even when we get there, did we get there soon enough to actually stop that move? And those are 2 questions that I don't have the answers to because I didn't play the snake side of the field. And in our experience, this gap right here on the snake side is actually really dangerous to survive. Like, it's hard to survive this gap because you have a lot of cross-field shots. But once you clear the gap, even still, if you try to go from this can up to this Aztec, it can be pretty dicey. And all the while doing this, you are running and gunning just so that you can potentially shoot the guy before he dives into the snake. So this isn't a really reliable place to be doing this job, but it is a place that you could do it, right? So let's continue to go on the snake side. So if I run over to the snake corner right here, you'll see that, okay, well, I have a really good view of this lane, of this zone right now. And as so long as I blind out a specific, well, as long as I'm blinding out as many bunkers as I possibly can, you can actually do that job safely right here, right? So I can actually take a knee just to the left of this tower or the left of this cake and shoot that without anybody else seeing me. Or if I wanted to be behind a bunker, I could do the same job right here, except that now I have to just keep my eyes out for this guy, which is totally doable. This is very easily doable because you just essentially shoot that zone and then you kind of keep in your periphery this guy whenever he decides to move. It's not very likely that as soon as he gets within your vision, he's going to shoot you in the face. It is possible. It's paintball. Anything's possible. But in any case, that's something to note. So this is another place where you could do this. Now, is this a reliable move to make? I would argue that any position past the can is going to be relatively safe because in our experience, like when we're looking heads up, all these shots are run and gun shots, right? And the only crossfield shots that we have to worry about is this gap right here. So if we survive this gap, then anything else is going to be the same, I guess, percent risk, right? If we want to look at it from that perspective. So I would argue that in this case, this is a potentially more reliable way of stopping the snake. But again, the only issue you're going to run into is speed, because if you're the front player, but you're running and gunning, you're probably not going to run as fast as the guy who's got his head down, sprinting and trying to dive into the snake. So you are still going to run into the issue where you're probably able to get to this bunker reliably or consistently, but you may not reliably shoot that person if you're trying to pick up that job. So let's look at crossfield shots now. So if I were to play the number 2 guy and I were to take a step here, well, first of all, I can't even see that snake gap. So there's just no way for me to pick that up. And if I play the number 1, it's still the case where I'm not going to see that guy. So you guys are so... Why are you playing Pokemon in my chat? Get out of here. So if we're wanting to shoot, again, I am using this as an example. Now, if I were to just assess what we've just done, I would say that there isn't a reliable way to kill the snake in that gap. That our chances of killing the snake actually have to come from either this crossfield shot up the Dorito side right here. It either has to come right here, or it has to come from our home guy who shoots over the top right here for this gap. That's really the best way to kill their front snake guy. So it wouldn't be to shoot that zone. Now that's to kill them off break. However, if we were to say, okay, they are pulling up short. Let's say they're pulling up short to the God bunker pretty much every point. So they're just pulling up here. Well, now we've analyzed who can do that job once the point has developed past the breakout, and who can reliably keep them out of the snake. And really the only bunker that can do that is this guy. Without it being a front player's job, right? Because there might be, let's actually look really quick. There might be a Dorito shot where that's possible. That one's too far behind. There isn't a primary or secondary bunker, it looks like, where you could do that job on the Dorito side of the field. So, like, because even in this Aztec, you can't really do that. Can you do it in the Beast? You can't do it in the Beast. So this would tell us that if we're trying to keep them out of the snake, what we have to do is shoot the blind shot at the home, and then either the number 2 on the snake side, or the back center guy has to make a move up to this Aztec as soon as they can and as safely as they can, and then proceed to shoot an insane amount of paint into this gap right here. Now, this isn't the only way they're going to get into the snake, right? They certainly can. If you are, for example, if you're holding that zone right here, they can certainly just run around it, and that's definitely a thing people do. So I'm just using this layout as an example, but you can see how this principle applies, right? We just walked the field. We just looked at, we're trying to answer a question. Who can keep somebody out of the snake? Well, unless you hit that shot off the break, you're not going to. But if they don't get into the snake right away, the only person who can really stop that is this, and that's still not that reliable. So keeping them out of the snake in any sort of realistic bunker is going to be really hard. But obviously, if we want to follow that up, we can understand that, well, even if they get into the snake, we actually can keep them from moving up the snake pretty easily from this position. I wouldn't say easily. This is actually a pretty difficult thing to do because you have to worry about the guy taking shots over the top right here, and obviously this shot right here. But this is a position of power where you could do that is like relatively safe to get to. The challenge is just that the Dorito side is going to cause problems for you because it's not that difficult to get to the 50 Dorito, and you're the first person to die if that's the case. So this is a pretty complicated field from that perspective, right? That's just how I would analyze this field. Like, I would start with a question and seek to answer it by understanding who can do it best. And so if we do that for every single spot on the field, we can then understand what jobs exist on that field. That's where, so as we've said, the first thing you have to do is understand your position from a basic fundamental level. From there, then you have to seek to answer questions that you have, like who can best keep the snake from the guy from getting into the snake? Who can best keep the guy from getting from Dorito 1 to Dorito 2, or even to keep him out of the Doritos? So once we ask all these questions and we seek to find those answers, we can then know who is primarily responsible for that job. Okay, so in the case of this field, we could say that the guy who keeps the snake out of their front player out of the snake is the number 2 on the snake side. So if you start to have problems with like, hey, we're dying, like they're getting to the snake either way faster than us, or like we're just, we're not keeping him out of the snake. Again, I'm trying to broaden this. I'm not trying to make it so specific to this layout, but you can start with understanding, okay, is that player doing their job effectively? Because the mistake that people make a lot of times is they'll start to look for other reasons or look to other sources as to the cause of the problem. But if you don't understand from the get-go who does that job best, then you can't answer the question of if they're even doing that job or if they're doing it poorly or effectively or what. Does that make sense? Okay. So now that we understand, again, I'm trying to be agnostic to this layout. Because this layout's kind of tricky in some cases for this. And this would certainly require a deeper analysis than what I'm going to do here on this field, right? This requires a couple hours worth of work, either like paying specific attention to it as you're playing. And like, that's the thing. You ask these questions as you play on the field. As you run into certain problems and scenarios, you have to come together as a team and say like, hey, why did we lose? Okay, we lost because they were getting into the 50 snake. Are we even, are we putting enough pressure to get them to like prevent them from taking that easily? And if one player says, well, I was holding him out of the snake and then I died, then you can start to ask the question, okay, well, you died. Did anybody pick up that job? Right? So let's now look at we're just going to keep using the snake as an example, right? We're going to keep using like the snake as being the primary thing we're trying to stop. Okay. So if I'm playing this, again, I'm going to use this as just just an example, okay? I'm not saying that this is exactly what I would do for this layout specifically, but this is, from my understanding, pretty accurate. But let's say that this is the breakout, okay? Let's say that I have a player who goes here, a player who goes here, a player who goes here, here, and then a guy who goes to the snake. And let's say that we knew that this guy was trying to hold, we'll just make it simple and say that he was trying to hold this gap, right? Keep him out of the snake 3, because the snake 1 turns out isn't that big of a deal. When they get to the snake 1, it's not that much pressure. But once they get to the snake 3, our team starts, like, things start to fall apart, okay? And let's say that they kill this guy. We're not going to even say who killed him, but let's just say they kill this guy, okay? Now, we just walked the field, okay? We understand that as soon as this guy dies, we've established that he was the best suited to take over that position. So we have a couple of choices now. We can either, like, because here's what happens. If this guy dies, this player on the inside of the route goes into the 50 and starts chopping up everybody. And as soon as one person starts getting pressure from that, they shout 50 snake, and then literally everybody's gun turns to the 50. Which is like the biggest, that's to me the biggest problem that lower divisions suffer from, is that everybody panics and tries to kill that snake guy, and most people waste their time not realizing that that's not their job. Their job isn't to do that. So you have to know when you're in a certain bunker or in a certain scenario, you have to know when I hear a certain call out, is it my job to pick that up? Is it my job to fight that guy? Is it my job to do something about it? And you have to know that if you want to play at a high level. This is something that I would need to, you know, like I don't even have the answers to that for this layout, because this is something that I intend to figure out next weekend. It's also why it's really important to make sure that you set up your field correctly, because if the angles are not correct, or at least like close to what it will be at the tournament, then you can mess this up really bad, because certain shots that you thought existed just don't anymore. So in this specific example, we have really two things that we can do to stop this gap while not crippling ourselves even further, right? And what I mean by that is, like, a really stupid move would be to like have the god go over to this tower. Not stupid per se, but like to make that move just for the sake of stopping this guy, it means that we give up this entire side of the field right here just for the sake of that move, right? We did establish that the snake side tower can do that, but for him to give up positioning to do it is not the play, right? So we have a couple choices. We can either send our home guy up to this bunker to pick up that job, which is certainly doable. And you know, you obviously just run the risk of putting yourself in the same position as to what killed your guy previously. So for example, if the 50 Dorito guy was the guy that killed this dude, then making that move is just going to send this guy to his death. That's because there's just two bodies, right? And this is a mistake that people make at all divisions, except for, I would say, the pro division is pretty good at this. The pro division is pretty good at not making this mistake, but instead understanding the jobs that everybody can pick up when somebody dies. So in this specific example, there's actually a shot, at least on the Seattle Thunder layout. I'm not saying it exists on everybody's layout, because I've heard that it doesn't in some cases, but you can actually shoot. Oh, I don't know why the line just was all the way over there. You can actually shoot this cake right here, supposedly, and it bounces into this guy. And like, it's very hard to survive that. Now, that guy has a choice. He can either play on the outside of this bunker to stay safe. He can back up, which I don't think there's any reason he would do that. Or he can immediately go low and try to make this move as fast as possible. And he may have already made that move by the time you get this intel, right? But if you are in the Dorito 1 and you're playing heads up, again, getting out of the Dorito 1 in this case is actually better than anything I'm about to tell you. But let's just pretend that you're here and you're shooting, and either you look across or you hear 01 insert teammate name here. Okay. Now you need to know which teammate went where. It's important for you to know what your breakouts are, because if you hear, you know, hey, 01 Brandon in our case, and Brandon plays the number 2 in the snake. If I hear 01 Brandon, then I know that Brandon just died, and I can immediately turn and start shooting this shot. And I can do that there's a certain length of time in which I can do this, but that is an option for us now. Okay. And the benefit to doing that, instead of forcing us to take the same positioning as we did before to do the same job, is that it's way safer, right? And in every case, it's much safer for me to do this, to just pick up that job for a second, and put pressure on the snake guy, than it would be for this guy to immediately take the same spot right after. Now, it isn't to say that, you know, in a perfect scenario, I would pick up this job and then I would communicate like I've got the snake, and then maybe this dude would fill out and then he'd become the number 1 or something, right? This isn't a case where like that zone would absolutely keep them from moving up the field, but in this case, that's not true. Like it's not going to stop them from getting up to the Viper necessarily. It's just going to apply a little bit of pressure to hopefully slow down the game. But again, the other option would be that I start to shoot this gap, and then I start to say, hey, somebody needs to pick up the snake, and then this guy fills out and does that job, assuming he can do so safely, right? So again, just a very specific example of how this is really applicable and how this is important. Okay. Now, anytime your front players pick up a job, it is a clock. It is a timer. You have to be able to either relieve that player of that job as the number 2 or the number 3, or you have to push the other side of the field. And that's really complicated. That's where it starts to get really difficult, and where communication in this case is like there's no way to do this without communicating, right? Because in cases like this, where you know, I've got a teammate right here and I'm right here and we lost. I'm drawing the wrong things, but let's say, you know, I'm here, I've got a teammate here, we lost a guy here, we've got a guy here, and we've got a guy, let's say even better, we got a guy right here. Okay. Well, in this scenario, it would actually be better, depending on how much farther ahead they are on the snake side than we are. It would probably be better for us to be pushing the Dorito side than it would be for us to try and plug the gap or plug the hole on the snake side. And then split the field. It kind of depends, but like this guy is pretty suited to stop the tape. He can do so. He's not going to stop the guy from getting up the Viper, which is definitely true. But like what you can do instead is you can do this and then look for that Viper move, right? And then what I can do is so if we say, for example, hey, you know, we lost Brandon, we got to push the Doritos. Then I switch from that job, or maybe I stayed up heads up, and then I start moving up the field. And I know I have to go. I have a go timer. Like I have to be pushing up this field, taking gunfights, putting so much pressure on my opponents where then I can push up and then get to this position where now we're starting to counterbalance, and either I can shoot this snake 3-shot, or again, I just keep playing tight and I'm trying to counterbalance by getting here. And then all the while, yeah, actually this isn't really a great bunker to stop that. But again, using this as just a hypothetical, if we said, hey, we lost Brandon, we need to push the Dorito side, and then Sage is over here and he shouts, I'm an island or something, or maybe even our number 3 guy, let's say Nick, shouts to Sage, hey, you're an island, meaning play your life, stay alive. Then what he could do is push up this Dorito side, and then I push up the Dorito side, and then my teammate follows up behind me. And so we just make this really strong push this direction instead of, because the other option would be, again, to like, you know, let's say this guy goes here and then we fill out here and we're trying to stop a guy who's already in this 50 snake. And at that point, when he's here, it's really dangerous to make this move, right? Or it's really dangerous to make that move even. So that's where understanding whether to plug the hole or to just push your advantage comes down to, I think, a couple of things. One, how early in the game did you lose that body? And 2, how far up one side of the field are you compared to the other? So if, for example, you lost your body in the first, like, let's say you lost this guy in the breakout, it would be easier then to fill out that position and get that spread that you're looking for, right? Then you could have this kind of setup, and you're just trying to distribute the bodies as best as you can, and you can win 4v5s with this spread kind of defense, you could call it, right? But if you're like 2 minutes into the point, or even less than that, if you're like 30-45 seconds into the point and your opponents have already gotten positioning on the field, and let's say the reason that this guy died is just because he lost this heads up gun battle to the Viper, well then it's way riskier for this guy to push out towards that position than it would be for him to, you know, let's take another scenario. So let's say I'm only here, we've got a teammate here, we lost this guy, and we've got a teammate here, and their dude that's killing us is right here. And again, it's like 30 seconds into the point. I should have put myself in Dorito 1, but you're pretty far behind, right? If they're already in the Viper and you're, let's say I'm not here, but you're instead in the Dorito 1, you're pretty far behind. So you kind of have to do damage control by filling out. But if in that same scenario, 30-45 seconds in, I'm in the Dorito 3 and we've got a teammate here and a guy here, and this guy's the one that's causing problems, it would be much safer to just push your advantage. Way safer to push your advantage, okay? So let's look at an example of where picking up another job would make sense. So let's say we've got, again, I'm not saying these angles are great, but let's just pretend that they are. So you have a breakout where you send your number 2 in the Dorito side here, you send a guy in the Dorito 1, a guy in the home, a guy here, and let's say you send a guy in Snake 1, okay? And let's say that you get up to the Dorito 2, or even better yet, you get up to the Dorito 3, okay? And again, let's say you lose this body, and these two guys are looking at each other and they're communicating. So we know that we lost a body. Well, if another way you can pick up the same job but do it on the opposite side of the field is for you to, what you would do is you'd push up to this tower and then up to this wedge and look cross field, for that move and like bait that guy to make that move. And then this guy, seeing that interaction happen right in front of him, would then take over to be the number 2 on the Dorito side. And he would then come over here, or better yet, an even simpler version of this would be that, so we go here, here, look this way. I'm in the Dorito 3. This guy's dead. We got a guy here. And in better yet, I would actually go to this position and I would take up this same job. Okay, because what we know from this layout is that this beast is really good at stopping this Dorito move. And if we know that going into the point or into the tournament, that this guy's really, his job is primarily to just shoot heads up and keep him out of the Doritos, then as soon as this guy moves up the field, we know that that job is not really being picked up anymore. Unless you know, I'm in the 50 and I'm rapping super hard on this guy, then it doesn't really matter. Because if this dude goes to here and starts shooting this gap, we're doing the same job. Right? And that's not good. So in this case, what we could do is we could either go to the corner and start rapping even harder and punishing the guys that are behind him, which is also a thing that people do. Or we could tell this dude, like if we're the number 3, we could tell this guy, hey, look Dorito way, you know, and then he's going to start maybe looking up the center, or essentially he's just holding this entire zone. And then let's say I'm rapping, and then this guy again decides to punch out, but now he's playing kind of a defensive role where he's essentially watching his snake player to just make sure he doesn't get run down, and that's it. Right? So understanding what positions do which jobs the best is really, really important to playing an effective number 3 and an effective number 2. It's hard for a number 1 to do that because they're so far up the field, and their primary job is to just be fast and explosive and listening to communication, and also relaying like really key communication like kills or who's stopping them, and they're also really good at getting cross field information. So it's really, because, you know, usually these people, the number 2s are playing heads up. And so if I'm here looking on the inside of the field and I see this guy die, or like, let's say he walks off the field and we're on the opposite pits, I can then shout, hey, we just lost Brandon or something. And I can tell that to this guy. So I can say, oh, 1, we lost Brandon, right? That's again, if I'm looking on the inside of the field, which as a number 1, it's always good when you make that move to check up the center of the field and make sure that nobody's coming to run down anybody. And you can also gauge what's going on the opposite side of the field in case, you know, you lost 2 bodies or something. Because in some cases, like I've had points with Christian where like I was playing the number 2 on the snake side and I was just doing everything I could to keep them out of the snake. And then Christian got up here and he's like, hey, you know, 0-2 on the Dorito side, stay over me or something, or he'll say switch. And so then he tells me, oh, hey, I got to look Dorito side and I got to start plugging the hole and, you know, potentially hold off this 2v4 or whatever. I'm just making something up, right? So hopefully that makes sense. I want to make sure that by the time this is done, that you guys walk away with feeling like you have a working understanding of what it is that I'm talking about, so that you can apply this when you go to the field, so that you can understand what the process looks like, so that any layout you run into, even if it's a blind layout, you can ask those questions that help you understand the jobs that exist on the field and then who does them best. And from there, it's really just working on, you know, it's who primarily does this job best and then who secondarily does it, who tertiarily does this. Is that a word? And so that, and you know, some jobs can only be done by filling in that exact same position, or other jobs can be done, but they come at a certain cost, right? So we already established that this position does this job best, but this position can also do this job, but it comes at the cost of you stop pushing the Dorito side the moment you pick up that job, so that there is a time constraint. You can't do that for the entire point, because if you do that for the entire point, you are literally giving them the Dorito side, even though they're taking advantage of the snake side. So you're essentially giving them advantages on both sides of the field. I'm going to take the silence in chat as no questions. So again, what I want, if I could stress anything, it would just be that you as a player in whatever position you're playing on whatever layout you're playing need to know whether or not you can deal with a particular threat in any given bunker. But you need to know, if I'm in a particular bunker and I hear 50 snake, should I look that way or not? You just need to know if that's something you should even bother looking at, or if it's just something you need to tuck in and just like play tighter. Or when you make a bump, you need to just be aware if he's looking your way or not. And so on every side of the field, you have to know that job, and you need to know, even better, you need to know of your teammates who should be picking up that job as well. So, because it's not just, you know, in one case it might be, all right, I know that if I call 50 Dorito, or let's call it Omaha, if I call Omaha, I can shoot the Omaha if he's wrapping in the Dorito 1. I can't really shoot him if he's looking on the inside of the field, even if he's wrapping kind of on the inside. But like, I can't really do that job, or maybe it's kind of not really a great example. Oh well, we'll use this anyway. But in some cases, it might be that we can actually hold them at that bunker for a lot longer and survive a lot longer than we could otherwise. If I simply shout, Omaha, Nick, shoot the Omaha, right? So then what that does for me is that frees me up to not feel like I have to stay dedicated on this lane, even though I have to check it off, right? Like, if there's a guy in the Omaha, it's always going to be a risk for him to wrap on me in this position from the Dorito 1 to the Dorito 2. But if I tell Nick to shoot the Omaha, he can actually watch over me and make sure that I don't just get run down for free. And all the while, it frees me up to still be working up the Doritos to eventually run him down, or potentially, you know, kill him and then fill behind and then start to go to work, right? We actually saw that in my barrel cam footage where I was here. I think I moved from here to there, and Patty was right here, and he was doing damage on the inside, and then he wrapped on the outside. But when I got to the Dorito 3, this guy actually had looked on the inside of the field, and so then I went and ran him down. I didn't know that, but I ran him down apparently at the right time. So this should be required study for each divisional player. I appreciate that, Ron. Thank you. I think that's it then. I think we've covered all that we wanted to.